In the scorching deserts of Syria, where blood and sand mix daily, even the most hardened warriors sometimes face questions they cannot answer. For one man, trained since childhood to hate the cross, an impossible encounter would change everything. I had my finger on the trigger. The Christian village was in our sights. I was ready to kill for Allah. But then I saw him standing in the battlefield, a man in white with wounds in his hands. What happens when the very enemy you've sworn to destroy stands before you, not with a sword but with outstretched hands? What happens when a man raised on hatred encounters perfect love? This is the story they don't want you to hear. The story of Malik Al-Jabbar, once one of ISIS's most lethal executioners, a man who discovered that no darkness is beyond the reach of divine light. What you're about to witness is not just a story, it's a living testimony that Jesus Christ is still intervening in our broken world. By the end of this video, you'll understand why even the most hardened hearts can be transformed in an instant. If this is your first time with us, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Why? Because each week, Jesus Intervened brings you documented accounts of miraculous encounters that are changing lives around the world. Stories the mainstream media will never show you. Share this video with someone who needs hope today. Now let's continue with Malik's extraordinary journey. Malik Al-Jabbar was born in 1992 in a small village outside Raqqa, Syria. His childhood was not one of innocent games or dreams of the future. It was a systematic preparation for holy war. From the time I could walk, my father taught me that there were two types of people in this world, the faithful and the infidels. And it was our sacred duty to eliminate the infidels. In the religious schools he attended, hatred for Christians was not just encouraged, it was required. Young Malik excelled at his studies, memorizing not only the teachings that fueled his hatred, but the techniques that would make him deadly. His father, a respected religious teacher, would point to the television whenever Christians appeared. See how they worship a dead man on a cross? See how they corrupt our lands with their lies? These words sank deep into Malik's young heart, forming roots of bitterness that would shape his destiny. By 18, Malik had already participated in his first attack on a Christian community in northern Syria. The fear in their eyes, as they fled their burning church, didn't bring him the satisfaction he expected. Instead, it left him with a hollow feeling he couldn't explain, a feeling he buried beneath layers of religious fervor. When ISIS began recruiting in his region in 2013, Malik was among the first to join. His dedication to the cause and his ruthless efficiency in carrying out orders quickly caught the attention of leadership. I believed I was fulfilling my purpose. Each Christian I killed, each church I destroyed, I thought I was purifying the land. His voice trembles slightly even now, remembering those dark days. The darkness in his soul grew deeper with each passing month. He participated in filmed executions, led raids on religious minorities, and trained younger recruits in the art of terror. His name became whispered in fear throughout northern Syria, but beneath the hardened exterior of this ISIS commander, something unexpected was stirring. Faint dreams began to haunt his sleep, dreams of a man calling his name, a man he had been taught to hate. I would wake up in cold sweat, hearing my name called by someone I couldn't see. I began to question if I was losing my mind, or worse, if I was being tested by evil spirits. As 2016 arrived, Malik found himself leading a unit of 30 fighters toward a small Christian village near the Turkish border. Intelligence reports indicated that several Western aid workers were present, a high-value target for their propaganda videos. The mission was simple: surround the village at dawn, execute the foreign Christians on camera, and make an example of any locals who had helped them. What Malik didn't know was that this routine mission would become the battlefield not just for bodies, but for his very soul. The night before the attack, as the stars hung brilliant over the Syrian desert, Malik prayed more fervently than ever before. But for the first time in his life, his prayers felt like they were hitting a ceiling, returning to him empty and hollow. The stage was set for a massacre, but heaven had other plans. The moon cast long shadows across the desert landscape as Malik gathered his men. 30 fighters, each armed and prepared to die for the cause, huddled around maps and satellite photos of the Christian village. "We strike at first light," Malik instructed, his voice steady as he traced the approach routes with his finger. Team 1 takes the church where the foreigners are staying. Team 2 secures the perimeter. No one escapes to tell the story, not until our media team releases the footage. Among his fighters was his younger brother Farid, just 17 and eager to prove himself in his first major operation. Malik had initially resisted bringing him, but their commander had insisted. "Let the boy become a man," he had said. As the meeting ended and the men dispersed to clean their weapons one final time, Malik walked alone to the edge of their camp. Something felt different about this mission. A heaviness had settled in his chest that no amount of prayer or recitation could remove. The stars above seemed to be watching him with judgment in their twinkling light. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine the faces of the people who would die tomorrow, not as enemies but as men and women with families, with dreams, with lives that would be cut short by his order. He quickly pushed these thoughts away. "Weakness," he muttered to himself. "This is jihad. This is holy." But the doubt remained, burrowing deeper like a desert scorpion seeking shelter from the cold night air. "Brother?" It was Farid, approaching with 2 cups of hot tea. "You seem troubled." Malik forced a smile, taking the offered cup. "Just focusing on tomorrow. Your first mission should be perfect." Farid sat beside him, his young face serious in the moonlight. "I had a strange dream last night," he said quietly, looking at the ground rather than at his brother. Malik tensed. "What kind of dream?" "I dreamed of a man dressed in white, standing on the hill where our target village is. He was weeping, brother. Just weeping. And when I tried to approach him, I couldn't move. It was like my feet were rooted to the ground." "You will not speak of this again," Malik hissed, gripping his brother's arm tightly. "These are the whispers of Shaitan, trying to weaken your resolve before battle. Say your prayers and clear your mind." Farid nodded, but his eyes revealed his uncertainty. "Yes, brother." After Farid left, Malik remained alone, staring at the distant hills where the Christian village lay sleeping, unaware of the danger approaching with the dawn. His brother's dream had shaken him more than he wanted to admit, because it mirrored fragments of his own recent dreams. That night, as Malik finally lay down to sleep, his last conscious thought was a fierce prayer against doubt. "Allah, give me strength for what must be done tomorrow. Let my hand not waver. Let my heart not weaken." But even as he drifted into sleep, something inside him was crying out for another kind of strength, the strength to see the truth his heart had been hiding from all these years. The darkness of the desert night enveloped the camp as 30 men slept, their weapons at their sides. 30 men dreaming 30 different dreams. But for Malik, the night would bring a vision that no training had prepared him for. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as Malik awoke. For a moment he lay still, something from his dreams lingering like a shadow at the edge of his consciousness. Something important that he couldn't quite grasp. "Commander, it's time." One of his men stood at the entrance to his tent, silhouetted against the grey pre-dawn light. Malik rose quickly, pushing aside the strange feeling. There was no room for distraction today. Today was about blood and glory and the expansion of the caliphate. Today was about destruction. The fighters moved with practiced efficiency, their black clothing blending with the lingering darkness. No one spoke beyond necessary commands. They had done this many times before, surrounding villages, executing infidels, filming the aftermath for their global audience of supporters and enemies alike. Malik performed his morning prayers mechanically, the familiar words feeling strangely empty as they left his lips. He checked his weapons one last time. An American-made M4 rifle taken from the body of a dead soldier, a pistol strapped to his thigh, and the ceremonial knife he used for filmed executions. They parked the vehicles a mile from the village to avoid detection. The rest of the approach would be on foot, using the rolling hills as cover. As Malik stepped out into the cool morning air, the first rays of sunlight were just beginning to spill over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "It looks like fire," whispered Farid beside him, looking at the sunrise. Malik nodded curtly. The fire of judgment that comes for the unbelievers. Now focus. The men spread out in their assigned formation, advancing steadily toward the sleeping village. Malik led from the front, his rifle held at the ready, his eyes scanning for any sign of early risers or guards. They crested the final hill that overlooked the village, and Malik raised his hand to signal a momentary halt. From here he could see everything: the small cluster of stone buildings, the church with its wooden cross, the few vehicles parked near what appeared to be a medical clinic. All was quiet. All was still. Perfect. Malik raised his rifle, aiming through the scope at the church door where the foreign aid workers would likely emerge for morning prayers. One clean shot would signal the beginning of the attack. One shot would unleash hell on this peaceful scene. His finger tensed on the trigger. That's when it happened. The air around him seemed to thicken, as if time itself was slowing down. A strange light, different from the sunrise, began to illuminate the space between him and the village. And then he appeared. Standing directly in Malik's line of fire was a man in gleaming white robes. Where he had come from, Malik couldn't say. It was as if he had materialized from the light itself. He stood with his arms outstretched, revealing wounds in his hands that seemed to radiate their own light. "Brothers, do you see him?" Malik gasped, pointing toward the figure. But his men looked at him in confusion, seeing nothing but the village before them. "Commander, what's wrong?" his lieutenant asked, concern etching his features. But Malik couldn't answer, because the man in white was looking directly at him now, and in those eyes was something Malik had never encountered before, a love so pure, so powerful and so personal that it cut through decades of hatred like a sword through paper. Malik. The voice didn't come through his ears, but seemed to resonate directly within his heart. "You have been running from me all your life, but I have never stopped pursuing you." Malik felt himself sinking to the ground, his weapon forgotten beside him. The world around him, his men, the village, the mission, all faded into insignificance compared to the presence before him. Who are you?" Malik whispered, though in his heart he already knew the answer. "I am Jesus, whom you have been persecuting." The words were gentle, without accusation, yet they carried the weight of absolute truth. Memories flashed through Malik's mind. Every church he had burned, every Christian he had tortured, every blasphemy he had uttered against this man now standing before him in radiant glory. The weight of it all should have crushed him, and yet instead, he felt something impossible. Forgiveness washing over him like cool water in the desert. "Your hands are stained with blood, Malik," Jesus continued, "but I can make them clean. I died for you. I love you, and I am offering you a new life." Tears streamed down Malik's face, the first he had shed since childhood. "It's too late for me," he choked out. "I've done too much. I'm too far gone." The figure stepped closer, and Malik could now see every detail of his face, the compassion in his eyes, the sorrow mingled with joy, the majesty beyond description. "No one is beyond my reach," Jesus said, and his voice seemed to echo across time itself. "Not even you. Especially not you." Commander Malik, what's happening?" The voices of his fighters seemed to come from a great distance. Malik became dimly aware that his men were gathered around him, some shaking him, others looking frantically toward the village to see what had caused their leader's collapse. His brother Farid was kneeling beside him, eyes wide with fear and confusion. But all Malik could see was Jesus, still standing between them and the village, arms outstretched as if to shield the innocent from harm. "You have a choice to make," Jesus said, his voice still resonating within Malik's heart. "Continue on the path of destruction, or follow me and discover why you were really created." And then, as suddenly as he had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving Malik kneeling in the dirt, forever changed. The sun had fully risen now, bathing the landscape in golden light, but the real dawn was breaking within Malik's heart, a new day that would change everything. "We continue the mission," his lieutenant was saying, trying to take command. "The commander is unwell. We proceed as planned." Malik rose shakily to his feet, his eyes clear despite the tears that had flowed. "No," he said, his voice cracking but resolute. "No one moves, no one fires. The mission is cancelled." His men stared at him in disbelief. "Cancelled? By whose order?" his lieutenant demanded. Malik looked toward the village, then back at his fighters. In that moment he saw them truly, for the first time, not as holy warriors, but as lost men led astray, just as he had been, young men with their lives ahead of them, being consumed by the same darkness that had nearly devoured his soul. "By my order," Malik said, strength returning to his voice. "And by the order of the one true God, who just showed me that everything we've been fighting for is a lie. This is Jesus Intervened, where we share real stories of divine encounters that are changing lives around the world. If you're finding this story of Malik's unexpected encounter with Jesus powerful, I want to encourage you to stay with us for the final chapters. What happened after Malik refused to attack the village? How did his fighters respond to his sudden change? And what became of the brother who shared his mysterious dream? The most incredible part of this testimony is still to come. Take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of how Jesus is intervening in the most unlikely places and in the most hardened hearts. Now let's return to the Syrian desert, where a former ISIS commander has just come face to face with the very God he had sworn to fight against. "He's lost his mind," the lieutenant's voice cut through the confusion. "The sun, the strain of command. Something has broken him." The fighters were divided, some looking at Malik with concern, others with growing suspicion. In their world, to abort a mission against the infidels was unthinkable, possibly even treasonous. Malik stood firm, though his whole body was trembling from the encounter. "I have not lost my mind," he said calmly. "For the first time in my life, I can see clearly." He looked at each of his men, these brothers in arms who had followed him faithfully into darkness for so long. "I saw Jesus Christ standing between us and that village. He spoke to me, and everything we've been taught about him is wrong." "Blasphemy!" the lieutenant shouted, raising his rifle. "Brothers, the commander has become an apostate before our eyes." Several fighters aimed their weapons at Malik, while others stood frozen in shock. Farid pushed through the group, placing himself between his brother and the guns. "Wait!" Farid cried out. "I told him about my dream, the man in white on this very hill. How could he have seen the same thing unless it was true?" The moment hung in the balance. 30 fighters, the morning sun climbing higher, weapons pointed in all directions. Death was a breath away. Malik closed his eyes briefly, feeling a peace that defied understanding wash over him. When he opened them again, his decision was made. "I will not attack this village," he said with quiet authority. "I will not kill another innocent in the name of a false understanding of God. Jesus Christ just showed me his love and his forgiveness, and I choose to follow him, even if it costs me my life right here, right now." "Then die a traitor's death," the lieutenant snarled. What happened next would later be described differently by each man present. Some would call it coincidence, others divine intervention. As the lieutenant's finger tightened on the trigger, a massive explosion rocked the valley, not from the village, but from behind them. An airstrike had hit their parked vehicles, whether from Russian, American, or Syrian government forces, they couldn't tell. But the message was clear. They had been discovered, their position was known, and more strikes would be coming. "Take cover," someone shouted, and the immediate threat to Malik was temporarily forgotten as the fighters scattered, looking for shelter from the coming attack. In the chaos, Malik grabbed Farid's arm. "This is our chance," he whispered urgently. "We must warn the village." Farid's eyes widened. "Warn them? Brother, have you truly changed so much in minutes?" Malik's gaze was steady. "Jesus stood between our guns and those innocent people. Now I must do the same. Come with me or stay, but I must go." Without waiting for his brother's decision, Malik began running. Not away from the airstrikes, but directly toward the Christian village. After a moment's hesitation, Farid followed. Behind them, more explosions tore through the hillside as fighter jets screamed overhead. Their former brothers scattered in all directions, the mission forgotten in the scramble for survival. Malik ran as he had never run before, his lungs burning, his heart pounding. But with each step, The burden of hatred he had carried for so long seemed to fall away, replaced by a desperate desire to save the very people he had come to destroy. The village had spotted them coming, two men in black running toward them across the open ground. They would look exactly like what they were, ISIS fighters approaching for an attack. "They'll shoot us on sight," Farid gasped as they ran. "Then we die telling the truth," Malik answered, not slowing his pace. As they approached the first buildings, Malik did something that would have been unthinkable hours before. He dropped his weapons, raised his hands high above his head, and began shouting in English, "Evacuate! Airstrike's coming! We're not here to harm you!" Several men with rifles appeared from between the buildings, local Christians who had learned to defend themselves after years of attacks. Their weapons were trained steadily on the approaching fighters. "Stop right there," one of them commanded in Arabic. "On your knees, hands behind your heads." Malik and Farid complied immediately, dropping to their knees in the dust. "There was an ISIS unit coming to attack your village," Malik explained rapidly, his words tumbling out. "I was their commander. But Jesus appeared to me on the hillside and everything changed. Then airstrikes hit our position. More will follow. You must evacuate immediately." The Christian defenders exchanged skeptical glances. "You expect us to believe that?" one of them asked. Before Malik could answer, the sound of explosions from the hillside grew more intense. The defenders looked up to see smoke rising from multiple locations and aircraft circling. A Western man, one of the aid workers, pushed through the group. "I don't know if his conversion story is true," he said pragmatically, "but those airstrikes certainly are. We need to move the children and elderly to the caves immediately." Decisions had to be made quickly. The village elder nodded sharply. "Bind these two and bring them with us. We'll sort out truth from lies once our people are safe." As the villagers quickly gathered essential supplies and helped the elderly toward the caves in the nearby hills, caves that had sheltered Christians since the earliest days of Christianity in Syria, Malik and Farid were bound and guarded closely. "What do you think they'll do to us, brother?" Farid whispered as they were marched along with the evacuees. Malik watched as mothers carried children, as the elderly were supported by the young, as these people he had demonized his entire life behaved with dignity and care for one another. "Whatever happens," he replied softly, "I am at peace. For the first time in my life, I am walking in truth." As they entered the ancient caves, sanctuaries that had protected believers through persecution after persecution across the centuries, Malik felt a profound sense that he was not just entering a physical shelter, but a new life, a life he had never imagined possible. The airstrikes continued throughout the day, systematically destroying the ISIS positions on the surrounding hills. By some miracle or divine protection, none came near the caves where the villagers had taken refuge. As night fell, Malik was brought before the village elders and the Western aid workers for questioning. Still bound, he knelt on the stone floor of the cave, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows on walls that had witnessed countless prayers over countless generations. "Tell us your story again," the eldest among them said, "and know that God hears every word you speak in this holy place." So Malik told them everything, his lifetime of hatred, the mission to destroy their village, and the divine encounter that had changed everything in an instant. He held nothing back, confessing atrocities he had committed, lives he had taken, his years as an instrument of terror. And then he told them about seeing Jesus, standing with outstretched hands between weapons and innocence. He described the eyes that had looked into his soul with perfect love and the voice that had called him by name. When he finished speaking, silence filled the ancient cave. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of the moment and remained quiet. Finally, the Western aid worker, a doctor who had spent years serving in conflict zones, spoke up. "I've heard similar stories before," he said slowly. "Former extremists who encountered Christ in visions or dreams. It's happening throughout the Middle East, Jesus appearing to those who have been taught to hate him." The village elder studied Malik's face intently. "The scriptures tell us to test the spirits. If this man truly saw our Lord, there should be evidence in his actions." He turned to Malik. "You say Christ has changed your heart. What would you do now to prove it?" Malik didn't hesitate. "I have information. locations of ISIS cells, planned attacks, names of leaders. I will give you everything I know to save lives. And then..." He paused. "I ask only for the chance to learn about the true Jesus, not the false version I was taught to hate." As the night deepened, an extraordinary scene unfolded in that ancient cave. Former persecutor and persecuted, sitting together by lamplight, speaking of faith and forgiveness. Malik and Farid's bonds were cautiously removed, bread was shared, and somewhere in those hours, seeds of reconciliation took root. By morning, when it was deemed safe to send scouts back to the village, a decision had been reached. Malik and Farid would be given shelter among the Christians, not as free men initially, but as seekers under supervision. Their information would be passed to authorities who could use it to prevent further attacks. And so began a journey that neither brother could have imagined just days before. A journey from darkness into light, from hatred into love, from death into life. 6 months later, the village had been rebuilt. Where bombs had fallen, new homes stood. Where hatred had threatened destruction, a new story of redemption was being written. Malik wiped sweat from his brow as he helped raise the new church roof. A church he had once come to destroy, now being restored by his own hands. Nearby, Farid was painting a classroom where children would learn about love instead of hate. "Still can't believe it," said Thomas, the American aid worker, who had become Malik's close friend, handing him a bottle of water. "Former ISIS commander building a church. God has a sense of humor." Malik smiled, looking up at the wooden cross that would soon crown the modest building. "Every nail I hammer is a prayer," he said simply. "A thank you for the second chance I don't deserve." The journey hadn't been easy. The first weeks had been filled with suspicion, with nightmares, with the painful process of deprogramming a lifetime of indoctrination. There had been government interrogations, Malik's intelligence saving lives across the region as ISIS cells were dismantled one by one. Some villagers still kept their distance, their wounds too fresh for immediate trust. But others, particularly those who had witnessed his confession that first night in the caves, had become his teachers, patiently answering questions, sharing scriptures, demonstrating what Christ's love looked like in daily actions. Farid had adapted more quickly, his younger heart less hardened by years of violence. He now led a youth group, using his story to help young people resist extremist recruitment. "The authorities called again," Thomas said, his voice lower. "Do they think it's safe enough now for you to do the interview?" Malik nodded solemnly. Word had spread about the ISIS commander who had converted to Christianity after seeing Jesus in a vision. Media outlets worldwide wanted the story, and officials believed his testimony could be powerful in counteracting extremist propaganda. "I'm ready," Malik said. "The world needs to know that Jesus is reaching into the darkest places, that no one is beyond his love." That evening, as the village gathered for prayer in the partially rebuilt church, Malik stood before people who had transitioned from being his intended victims to his spiritual family. "Tomorrow I will tell our story to the world," he began, his voice steady but humble. "I will speak of how Jesus appeared on a hillside and stopped a massacre, how he reached into the heart of a killer and found something worth saving." He paused, looking at the faces around him, faces that had shown him forgiveness he still couldn't fully comprehend. "But before I tell the world, I want to thank you, my brothers and sisters. You could have executed me that day in the caves. Instead, you showed me what true faith looks like. You put hands and feet to the vision I saw on the hillside. The miracle didn't end when Jesus disappeared from my sight," Malik continued, emotion now evident in his voice. "The miracle continued through you, through every act of forgiveness, every patient explanation, every shared meal. Every moment you chose love over revenge." The village elder, who had been Malik's most persistent teacher, stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "And we thank you, brother, for showing us that God's power to transform has no limits. Your presence among us has strengthened our faith as well." As the simple service concluded, and people embraced one another in the warm evening air, Malik stepped outside and looked toward the hillside where everything had changed. The same stars that had witnessed his darkness now shone down on his new life. Farid joined him, following his gaze. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. walking away from everything we knew? Malik turned to his brother, his eyes reflecting the starlight. How can I regret trading death for life, hatred for love, darkness for light? He shook his head slowly. I was a dead man walking, Farid. Now I am truly alive for the first time. The brothers turned at the sound, a reminder that beyond their village of miracle and transformation, conflict still raged. There was still darkness to be pushed back, still lives to be saved, still truth to be spoken into deception. The next day, cameras would roll as Malik shared his testimony with the world. His words would reach prison cells where other fighters questioned their cause. His story would bring hope to Christians facing persecution across the region. And somewhere, another heart hardened by hatred would begin to crack open to the possibility of a love stronger than any ideology. As night deepened over the Syrian village, Malik offered one more prayer of gratitude, not just for his own redemption, but for the divine encounter that had turned an instrument of death into a messenger of life. The light shines in the darkness, he whispered, quoting the scripture that had become his life verse, and the darkness has not overcome it. In a region torn by war and religious hatred, one hillside vision had sparked a story of transformation that would ripple outward in ways no one could yet imagine. And it had all begun with a simple divine invitation to lay down weapons of hatred and follow the way of love. What you've just witnessed is more than a story. It's a testimony to the power of divine intervention in our broken world. Just as Jesus stood on that Syrian hillside and transformed a hardened ISIS fighter into a follower of Christ, he stands ready to intervene in your life today. No darkness is too deep. No heart is too hardened. No past is too painful for the transforming love of Jesus Christ. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to take 3 simple actions. First, subscribe to Jesus Intervened and turn on notifications, so you never miss another documented account of how Christ is moving supernaturally around the world today. Second, share this video with someone who needs hope, someone who might be questioning whether God still works miracles in our modern age. Your share could be the divine appointment that changes a life. Finally, leave a comment below sharing how this story impacted you or how Jesus has intervened in your own life. Your testimony could be the spark someone else needs. Thank you for watching until the end. This is Jesus Intervened, where we document the living reality that our Savior's work didn't end at the cross. It continues today in the lives of people just like you,